She left her engagement ring on the kitchen counter and walked out of a billionaire's life without looking back. No screaming, no threats, no dramatic breakdown. Just a ring, a note, and a silence so complete it took Kang Tae-hyun 3 days to understand she was never coming back. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Because before the silence, there were 7 years of a woman pouring everything she had into a man who slowly forgot to pour anything back. Maya Brooks arrived in Seoul at 24 years old with a master's degree in international business, a suitcase that was slightly too heavy, and a curiosity about the world that had always been bigger than the city she grew up in. She was sharp, warm, and the kind of woman who made people feel immediately comfortable, the kind whose intelligence was noticeable not because she performed it, but because everything she said was simply worth listening to. She met Kang Tae-hyun at a technology conference, where he was a panelist, and she was covering the event for a business publication. He was already impressive then, even before the billions, even before the magazine covers. He had the kind of focused energy that made rooms tilt slightly in his direction. Maya noticed him. He noticed her noticing him. By the end of the evening, they had spoken for 4 hours and missed the closing dinner entirely. What started as an unlikely connection became the great love story neither of them had planned for. In those early years, they were genuinely partners. Tae-hyun was brilliant, but reckless, bold, but sometimes blind to the practical details that kept a company alive. Maya balanced him. When he wanted to take a financial risk that would have overextended the company, she sat across from him at midnight with spreadsheets and a calm voice and talked him back from the edge. When his board of directors pushed back on a new direction, she helped him build the argument that eventually won every single one of them over. When his own family raised their voices about him bringing a black woman into the family, refusing to accept the relationship, calling it inappropriate, calling it temporary, Maya never flinched. She held his hand through every dinner that felt like a tribunal and smiled with a warmth that slowly wore their resistance down. She was not naive. She knew exactly how much she was giving. She gave it anyway, because she believed in what they were building. Not just the company, the life, the future, the family they had quietly promised each other in late-night conversations when the rest of Seoul was asleep and the only light came from the city below their window. By the time Tae-hyun's company became a name that financial analysts tracked obsessively, Maya was so woven into its foundation that removing her would have been like removing load-bearing walls. She had no official title. She wanted none. She was simply the person he called when everything went wrong, the person who stayed when every rational calculation suggested leaving, and the person who celebrated quietly while the world gave him all the credit. 7 years in, he finally asked her to marry him. He did it simply, privately, without the theatrical gesture the press would have expected from a man of his wealth. Just the two of them on the balcony one evening, a ring he had chosen himself, and a question that felt less like a proposal and more like an acknowledgement of what had always been true. She said yes before he finished the sentence. The wedding was set for 3 weeks later. Small, intimate, exactly what Maya wanted. Her family flew in from abroad. Friends began arriving. There were flowers to arrange, and a dress that had taken 4 fittings, and a venue that Maya had fallen in love with the moment she saw it. For 3 weeks, she was the happiest she had ever been. Then Yoon Seo-yeon came back. Tae-hyun heard the news the way people always hear the kind of news that changes everything, casually, unexpectedly, in the middle of an otherwise ordinary afternoon. A mutual acquaintance mentioned it. Seo-yeon was back in Korea. She had been living abroad for 8 years. She was back now. She wanted to reconnect. That evening, Tae-hyun was quiet at dinner. Maya noticed but said nothing. She noticed the following day, too, when his phone buzzed repeatedly, and he tilted the screen away from her before answering. She noticed the meetings he suddenly needed to attend alone, the evenings that ran longer than they should have, the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't looking. something unreadable in his expression that had not been there before. One evening she asked him directly. They were in the kitchen, and she kept her voice steady and her eyes on his because she had always believed in facing things rather than circling them. "Tae-hyun, is something happening that I should know about?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Work is intense right now. There's a lot moving at once." "Is it only work?" A pause. "Just slightly too long." "Yes." "Why?" Maya held his gaze. "Because you've been somewhere else for 2 weeks, and I'm standing right here." He reached across and covered her hand with his. "You worry too much. Everything is fine, I promise." She wanted to believe him. She chose to believe him, because that is what 7 years of trust looks like. You choose it, even when the evidence makes choosing it difficult. Seo-yeon was not a woman who left things to chance. She had returned to Korea with a specific agenda, and Tae-hyun was central to it. She understood him in the particular way that people who once loved you always understand you. The pressure points, the old wounds, the memories that still carry weight. She used all of it deliberately and without guilt. She texted him late at night, referencing things only the two of them would remember. She manufactured small emergencies, moments that required his attention, decisions that supposedly only he could make. She was never aggressive. She was patient, careful, and precise. She knew that men like Tae-hyun did not respond to pressure. They responded to need. She made herself indispensable to emotions he had buried and forgotten he still carried. Meanwhile, Maya was ordering centerpieces and confirming guest meals and telling herself that the man she loved was simply stressed and that in 3 weeks everything would be settled and they would finally begin the life they had been building toward for 7 years. She was wrong. 3 days before the wedding, Tae-hyun came home with the expression of a man who had already made a decision and was only now arriving to announce it. Maya was at the dining table reviewing the final seating arrangement. She looked up when she heard the door. Something in his posture made her put down the papers. He sat across from her. He could not quite meet her eyes at first. "Maya." His voice was careful, controlled, the way his voice always sounded when he was about to say something he knew would cause damage. "I think we need to postpone the wedding." The words landed in the room and sat there. Maya did not move. She did not speak immediately. She simply looked at him, waiting for the part where he clarified that he was joking or elaborating on some temporary logistical problem that had a solution. But his expression did not change. He was completely serious. "Postpone," she repeated. "There are business matters that need immediate attention, and some personal things I need to work through. The timing is not right." The timing. Her voice was quiet, dangerously quiet. "Tae-hyun, my family is here. The venue is booked. The flowers are arriving in 2 days. Our guests have bought flights. What personal things?" He looked down. "It's complicated." "Is it Seo-yeon?" Silence. "Look at me," Maya said. "Is it Seo-yeon?" He raised his eyes, and in them she found the answer he would not put into words. He did not say yes, but he also did not say no. And in 7 years of knowing this man completely, Maya had learned that his silences were never accidental. "So she is the business matter," Maya said slowly. "She is the personal thing." "It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. Explain it to me. Give me something, Tae-hyun, because right now I am sitting here 3 days before our wedding, and you are telling me to wait. Again." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. She steadied it. "Am I no longer your first choice?" The question hung between them. He opened his mouth and closed it again. Then he said the words that would live in Maya's memory for a very long time afterward. "You understand me better than anyone." It was not an answer. It was an evasion dressed in affection. And Maya understood immediately what it meant. Not that she didn't matter, but that mattering was not the same as being chosen. She nodded slowly. She said nothing else that evening. She did not cry in front of him. She did not beg, or threaten, or demand. She simply stood, gathered the seating chart from the table, and walked to the bedroom, closing the door behind her, with a softness that was somehow worse than slamming it. That night, alone in the dark, Maya did not fall apart. She sat on the edge of the bed and she thought, clearly and deliberately, about the 7 years behind her. The company she helped save, the board meetings she prepared him for, the family dinners where she smiled through hostility, the engagement she had celebrated with the kind of joy that does not perform itself. And now this, 3 days before the wedding, after everything. She thought about who she was before Tae-hyun, the woman who had arrived in Seoul with a full life ahead of her, and had quietly narrowed that life to fit around a man who now could not even tell her she was still his first choice. She opened her email. There was a message, months old, from an international humanitarian organization. They had been trying to recruit her for a leadership role, directing educational development initiatives across several African countries. She had declined twice, gently each time, without fully explaining that she was declining because she did not want to leave Tae-hyun. She read the email again. Then she wrote back. 3 sentences. She was available. She was interested. She could start within the month. She sent it before she could reconsider. Then she sat in the dark for a long time. And when she finally understood that she was not going to cry, she realized it was because some part of her had already known this was coming. Had known for weeks, maybe longer. The heart is often the last to admit what the gut has already understood. She packed quietly and methodically over the next 2 hours after Tae-hyun had fallen asleep. She did not take everything, only what was essential. Her documents, her laptop, clothes, the photographs she cared most about, the box of small things that belonged to her, and had always belonged to her, before any of this. She left the engagement ring on the kitchen counter. Beside it she placed a folded note. You chose who mattered most. It's time I chose myself. Goodbye, Tae-hyun. She was gone before sunrise. When Tae-hyun woke up and walked into the kitchen, the first thing he saw was the ring. He stood very still for a long moment. Then he picked up the note. He read it twice. He set it down and looked at the empty spaces where her things had been. The shelf by the door, the corner of the bathroom counter, the kitchen hook where she always hung her favorite jacket. He called her immediately. The call went to voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. He told himself she needed time. She would reach out when she was ready. She would call one of her friends, cool down, and come back. This was Maya. She had always stayed. Through everything, she had always stayed. She did not call. She did not write. She did not come back. Days passed, then a week, then 2. His calls went unanswered. His emails disappeared into silence. He contacted people they both knew, and every single one of them either genuinely did not know where she was or had been asked not to say. Even her family, who had flown in for a wedding that never happened, looked at him with a disappointment so quiet and absolute it was more painful than anything they could have said. He began to understand that this time was different. He began to understand that she had not left in anger. She had left in clarity, and that was so much harder to argue with. Meanwhile, without Maya beside him, his clarity about Seo-yeon arrived quickly and brutally. Within weeks, her stories began collapsing. Small inconsistencies first, then larger ones. The emotions she had performed so convincingly began revealing their architecture. She was not a woman in the middle of rediscovering old love. She was a woman with a plan, and the plan had never been about him. It was about access, his connections, his leverage in the industry, his name attached to a venture she was quietly building behind his back. When the corporate scandal broke, the evidence was undeniable. Seo Yan had fed false information to a competitor during a critical merger negotiation, using access she had gained through Tae-hyun. The deal collapsed. Investors withdrew. His company absorbed losses that took months to calculate and years to fully repair. His reputation, built painstakingly over a decade, absorbed a hit that every business publication in Korea covered in detail, and all of it could have been avoided. Maya had tried to tell him, in her way, through questions and silences, and the look in her eyes the night everything changed. She had tried to tell him without saying the words. He had not listened. He sat in the penthouse one evening, alone in a way that the absence of someone specific makes singular, and he thought about everything Maya had been. Not what she had done for the company, though that was significant and real, but who she had been to him. The calm she brought into rooms, the way she never needed to be the loudest person present, but was always somehow the most important one. Her laugh, which she gave easily and genuinely. The way she listened, completely, as though whatever you were saying deserved her full attention. He thought about the night she had sat with him for 6 hours, talking him through the worst crisis the company had ever faced, and then made tea and told him that she believed in him, and meant it so completely that he had believed it too. He thought about how many times she had chosen him, how many times she had stayed, how she had absorbed his family's coldness with a grace he had never adequately acknowledged, how she had declined opportunities she had never told him about them all to remain by his side. He thought about the night he told her to postpone the wedding, and instead of fighting him, she had simply gone quiet, and he had mistaken her silence for acceptance, when what it actually was a woman finally understanding something she had been refusing to understand. The greatest mistake of his life had not been trusting Seo Yan. It had been failing Maya so thoroughly that she stopped trusting him. 2 years passed. Tae-hyun rebuilt the company slowly, without the shortcuts, and without Seo Yan. He was effective but mechanical now, excellent at the work, but operating without the inner certainty he had once had. People who knew him well said he had changed, become harder to reach, more efficient but less present. He was running something successful and felt almost nothing about it. Maya, from what scattered reports reached him, was doing the opposite of disappearing. She was leading a regional education initiative that had restructured school infrastructure across 3 countries. She was on committees advising governments. She was speaking at conferences that gathered the kind of people who made decisions that shaped continents. She had appeared on the cover of a magazine he saw once at an airport, and stood in front of for too long before boarding his flight. She was not surviving without him. She was flourishing. Then one evening, he saw her on television, an international humanitarian award ceremony. Maya was accepting the recognition with a composed, genuine warmth that the camera loved and that he recognized immediately. Beside her, one hand placed briefly, and naturally at the small of her back, was a man Tae-hyun did not recognize at first, and then identified quickly through a search. David Okoye, entrepreneur, philanthropist, known for his work across East Africa and his investments in technology infrastructure for underserved communities. The way David stood beside her was not performative. He was not positioned for the cameras. He was simply there, close, in the way that people are close when closeness has become natural. When Maya said something quietly, David leaned in and listened, then smiled. It was a small moment. Tae-hyun watched it on a screen and felt something shift permanently inside him. He booked a flight the following morning. He was not entirely sure what he intended to say. He knew only that he needed to say something, that the silence he had been carrying was becoming unbearable, that he owed her words she had deserved 2 years ago and never received. He found her at a charity gala, a large, elegant event that his industry connections allowed him to attend. He spent an hour watching her move through the room before he approached, partly because he needed the time, and partly because watching her was like looking at a version of the future he had thrown away with both hands. She saw him before he reached her. Something crossed her face briefly, a flicker of recognition. Then it was replaced by the composed, courteous expression of a woman who had genuinely made her peace. She did not look away. She waited for him to come to her. Maya. Tae-hyun. Her voice was even. Not cold. Not warm. Simply steady. You look well. Thank you. A pause. The noise of the gala surrounded them. He had rehearsed this, but everything he had prepared evaporated. I owe you more than an apology, he said finally. But I'll start there. I'm sorry. I was wrong. Not just about Seo-yeon. About all of it. About every time I treated the most important thing in my life, like it would always be there, no matter how I handled it. Maya looked at him for a long moment. I know you mean that. I want another chance. I know I don't deserve it. I know what I'm asking. But I need you to know that I understand now what I had, and I understand what I did. And I would spend the rest of my life. Tae-hyun. Her voice was gentle but absolute. Let me tell you something. He stopped. For years, I believed that loving you meant waiting for you to catch up to what I already knew we could be. I kept telling myself that patience was love, that loyalty was love, that staying when every reasonable part of me recognized I was being placed second, third, whatever I was placed, that staying through that was the ultimate proof of how much I cared. She paused. Around them, people moved and talked, and the evening continued, as though the most important conversation of his life was not happening in the middle of it. The night you postponed our wedding, I finally understood something I had been refusing to understand for a very long time. You had already made your choice. You had been making it quietly for weeks, and I had been standing in front of you pretending the choice wasn't happening, because I did not want to be the woman who gave up on someone she loved. Maya, I don't hate you, she said, and the lack of bitterness in her voice was the most devastating thing about it. I did, for a while, and then I didn't. And then I understood that holding on to the anger was just another way of staying attached to something that had already ended. I let it go. I let you go. And Tae-hyun, I want you to hear this clearly. Her eyes held his without wavering. I don't belong to you anymore. He had no answer for that. There was no answer. She had not said it cruelly. She had said it the way someone states something that has simply become true. The way you might say the season has changed, or the road runs north. A fact. Complete and quiet, and final. He nodded once. His throat was tight. He's a good man? For the first time that evening, something in her expression softened slightly. He's a very good man. Good. The word cost him something. He said it anyway. You deserve that. She smiled, and it was real, and it was kind, and it was the last smile she would ever give him that carried any trace of what they had once been. Take care of yourself, Tae-hyun. She walked back toward the center of the room, toward David, who had been speaking to someone across the space, and now looked up and found her easily, naturally, the way people find each other when they have made a habit of looking. Tae-hyun watched her go. He attended their wedding 3 months later, having received an invitation he suspected was Maya's way of giving him a door rather than a wall. He sat near the back. He watched her walk toward David in a dress that was nothing like the one she had once packed away from their penthouse. She was radiant in a way that had nothing to do with the occasion, and everything to do with the fact that she was in the right place, finally, completely, without reservation. She did not look in his direction. Not from carelessness, simply because everything she needed was already in front of her. As the ceremony ended and the room filled with celebration, Tae-hyun sat quietly and absorbed a lesson he had needed 7 years and one catastrophic mistake to learn. The people who love us most are rarely the ones who make the most noise when they are leaving. They are the ones who stay long past the point that makes sense, who give more than was asked, who choose us over and over even when we give them every reason not to. And they do this quietly, without demanding credit for it, because their love is real and real love does not perform. And one day, if you have taken it for granted for long enough, they make a different choice. Quietly, without drama, at sunrise, with nothing left behind but a ring and a note and a silence that will follow you for the rest of your life. If this story moved you, hit the like button and let us know in the comments what moment hit you the hardest. Subscribe so you never miss a story, because the next one is already waiting for you.